one of the verses that we had used before that I really like a lot as we move towards conflict resolution is Colossians 3:12 through 14. And I'll just read it, y'all can see it. But so as those who have been chosen of God, holy and beloved, put on a heart of compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, bearing with one another and forgiving each other. Whoever has a complaint against anyone, just as the Lord forgave you, so also should you. Beyond all these things, put on love, which is the perfect bond of unity. What I want to try to do is I want to show you a glance of where we're going over the next months, not to overwhelm you, but just to let, some people like to know where we're going, but basically what we're going to start going through is a conflict resolution, whatever you want to call it, a grid, a process, and this works for me in teaching and stuff, and I'll basically go through some of it. Basically, there's a situation that happens. It brings about negative thoughts, negative feelings, actions, whether it's yelling or shutting down or leaving or hurling insults or whatever. And then there's the area after the break, which is what we try to build in a time to take a break, and then we can process what has gone on. And we'll get into this into a lot of detail, but then there's self-awareness. And the self-awareness is not some Eastern thing. Self-awareness is what's going on in me. If I'm this angry with you, what's going on in me? I think our tendency is more, if I'm angry, let me tell you why I'm angry with you and let me tell you what you've done. So it becomes more accusatory and we kind of miss what's going on. But there's usually something going on inside of us. If we're angry, something's been hit, something's been touched. And so what we're gonna start on today is who we are. And who we are is going to be real important if we're going to get past this hurling insult kind of thing. And who we are is going to have a couple of different pieces to it, if I can even get the slide to work. Okay. On the surface, who we are is one thing. Like, for example, when we go around class and say, tell me about yourself, and it's, here today, we didn't do it so much today because everybody here has been here before, but usually it's what's your name, what's your, do you have kids? How old are they? What's your occupation, if that's it? How long have you been married? So it's a very pretty surface thing. It's the kind of thing if you met somebody on a plane, that's kind of the thing that you would do, or if you just met somebody outside. But it's not a real deep who we are. It really isn't our inner thoughts. And it's nobody's business, quite frankly, when we first meet them, of all that's going on in our life. But as we move towards understanding how to resolve issues in marriage, it's real important to understand two things. Number one, who am I? Who am I? And I'll show you the different depths of who I think we need to know who we are. And then who is my partner? If I don't understand my partner and her past hurts and things that have happened or her family influences, then I can't really move as well in compassion towards her. If she doesn't understand where I've come from, it really becomes more judgment for either of us or any of us. If it's the I'm angry with you and here's what you've done wrong, that's just judgment. There's really no understanding. We don't want to understand at that point. We've been hurt and we do whatever we do. So there's different who we are. There's who we are in private. When we're not around a whole lot of people, there's who we are in public. There's who we are at work. Do you see what I'm getting at? So it's like you'll say, you're not like this at home, or we'll go out to a party. This isn't who you are then. And so sometimes that adds to some confusion in the relationship of who are you really, and then who are you at home. Is certainly one of them. Who are we with our kids, our friends, or our spouse? I can tell you, we kept our grandson last weekend, and there was a part of me that came out that if I had to best describe who I became, it's Bozo the Clown. I literally went batty over this kid, and everything honked, and stuff that doesn't honk. He'd touch something, and I'd go, woo, make some silly sound. And I know my wife's going, who in the world are you? She'd never seen me raise or be around a little baby before. So that's part of who I am. It's dorky, it's whatever, but it is a part. I need to kind of calm it down because it got a little crazy, but then again, with grandkids, I don't know. It's interesting. It's an interesting journey that we're going through because we'll get to find out a lot about each other through this. Who are we in church? Don't you think we're a little different here than than we are at home or in private or at work. I mean, sometimes we dress differently, we talk differently, different types of language. I think enough said there. No, I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about y'all, But yeah. But who are we when we get under stress? Who do we become when we're hurt or we're afraid? Very different from who are we when things are calm and relaxed. When stress is down, we're good old whoever we are, but when stress starts happening, or fear or hurt or shame or you name it, then another side of us kind of comes out, a self-protective side maybe, or a lashing out side. And I keep going back to Paul saying, I do what I don't want to do and I don't do what I want to do, and there's sin in us. So we'll get into that more and more, but who we are under stress I think is real important. We'll come back to that at some point. Then there's, who do we want people to think we are? I mean, what are we posing some great front? Or are we very real with people? Do we need to feel and look successful or happy in our marriages? Do we need to look like Barbie and Ken? Or are we more open than that? So, who we want people to see us as is another part of who we can become, okay? Who we think we are, but we'll get into more of that in just a minute. Now here we get into what I would call a little bit more where we're going today, which is who we believe we are when all is well. Who we believe we are. Who do I think I am? Do I feel adequate? Do I feel, when all is well, am I confident? Am I sure of myself? But when all is not well, who do I become? When life gets tough and stress gets high, who do I believe that I am in that? Am I worthless? Am I inadequate? Do I go to those places of shame? We all go different places. Who do we believe we are when we're walking well with God? When I'm walking with God, I'm a different person. When I'm in touch, when I'm praying and reading the Word and talking to God, I'm a different guy. I'm less critical, less judgmental. Who do we believe we are when we're not walking with God? We go more towards what I think our flesh tends to go to when we're not in touch with our Creator. There's another side to us that comes out. So all of this becomes important to me. I think the top part, this first section, is kind of how we behave, the different ways we behave under certain circumstances. I think this one about we want people to think we are, that's kind of what kind of impression we want to put out there in the public. And then a self-view of who we think we are is who I think I am. I mean, we've all got different views of ourselves than we really are. It's kind of like if you've ever recorded yourself or videoed yourself or heard yourself on tape. First time I heard myself on tape, I thought, who's that hick? I mean, that's what I thought. I thought, who is that? And I realized it was me, and I hated hearing me. But when I sang in the shower, I thought it was pretty good. But when I heard it back, I thought, that's not near as good as I thought it was. So my view of myself is sometimes skewed. This bottom part is more of the belief level that I want to move towards who we are, and who we believe we are is very important. So I want to give an example, and this is based on no one other than a fictional John Doe kind of guy. And I'll show you some different attributes. So let's take John Doe, 6'2". This is a description of who he is. You just met him. This is what you're going to experience. Good-looking guy. So you already know it's not me. I'm not 6'2". I've cut myself out pretty good there. He's got brothers and sisters. He likes jazz and blues. I put that in because I like jazz and blues. He played football. He's got a good personality, outgoing kind of a guy. Kind of quiet, but not always so quiet. Went to a great college. I won't tell you which one because I don't know, and y'all all go to different colleges, and I don't want to get cheers and stuff started in here. Had a high GPA. To me, that's a high GPA. I'm not going to share mine. Mine might have been a 3. It might not have been that. He likes to have fun. He's a Christian, and he's a banker. Okay, so this is nobody U.S. I'm telling you, this is really nobody in particular. But at first glance, this is enough to impress someone that this is the kind of person they want to be with or not be with. I mean, this is getting to know someone at a level of these are some pretty nice attributes, potentially. I mean, good looking, likes good music, great music, really, jazz and blues, the best. In other words, he's a smart guy, he's got a job, he's a provider. So this is enough to attract someone to a person. Now this guy, once you get married to this guy, he can go any number of ways. He can turn out to be a pastoral guy. He can turn out to be a wonderful, godly man that's a wonderful husband. He can be, thank you. He can be a great father. He can play with the kids. He can be involved in men's ministry. He can do all kind of stuff. He can be financially stable and shares and gives. He can do, so I'm not trying to paint the picture of just this loser guy, but he might, when he gets married, because I think when we get married, we begin to realize who we've married. And we start going, oh, I didn't know that about you. And then that develops over the years. So let's give a negative view of what could happen to this guy that had these pretty good attributes at first glance. Good looking guy, but you know what? We're starting to find out this guy's arrogant and full of himself. He's got brothers and sisters. Okay, the truth is one brother's in jail, one brother's in a rehab center, one sister died in a motorcycle wreck, and the other sister, he's so enmeshed with her that he can't have a relationship with his wife because he's still having such a tight relationship with his sister. So at first glance, pretty reasonable, healthy guy. After you get to know this guy, you start uncovering a lot of junk, and there's a reason why I'll go through this. So he's got brothers and sisters. Once again, he likes jazz and blues, so he's perfect in that way. But maybe he hates your kind of music. Maybe all he wants to listen to on the radio is jazz and blues, and I hate your top 40 stuff or classic rock or whatever. So maybe he's unreasonable. Played football. Maybe he's still living the glory days. Maybe he can't get over the touchdown, and he just needs to tell the story. Maybe that's become his value. Maybe that's his identity. You see what I'm saying? So all of a sudden, what looked like Mr. Perfect, maybe not. So none of us are perfect, but this is worst. This is pretty bad. I won't say this is worst case scenario. And if this is your husband or you, I'm not. I promise you, I'm not. No one paid me to say, would you just here's some attributes. Good personality, but then we find out he's posing. He's really extremely insecure. He's a people pleaser. Who'd have thought it? You know, he's quiet. Well, maybe he's a conflict avoider. Maybe he's fearful. Maybe he shuts down in arguments. Maybe he isolates and pulls away and goes off binge drinking or does drugs. There's no telling. We don't know enough from that first impression of this guy. He went to a great college. Maybe he's got a superiority complex. Maybe he's better than me. Maybe he's better than anybody that didn't go to that college or make that kind of grade. Maybe he's condescending to people that aren't as smart as him. Likes to have fun. Well, maybe he needs to drink to have fun. Maybe he brags about himself and how great he was in football, or he has to flirt to have fun. So after these guys have been married, Barbie and Ken kind of mentality, this guy's not such a great guy after all. Maybe he's a banker. Maybe money is his security. Maybe he puts his wife on a tight little budget and he's scared to death that if money's gone, we're dead, and their marriage gets stressful over finances. He complains when you spend too much. I know none of y'all deal with that, but I've heard of people that do. He's a Christian. We know that going in, but maybe he's running from God right now. Maybe he's living in shame, and maybe he's a hypocrite. So all that to say, we are complicated people. We're not what you see. We're not ever what we just see going into the deal. As we get married, we start finding out stuff about people. All these hopes and dreams and perfect, the Jerry Maguire again, the you complete me kind of thing. I'll be happy forever. I mean, people come to counseling because it isn't going happily ever after. Something's gone wrong. This perfect looking person is not so perfect. They rarely come in and say, I'm really messed up, he's perfect, but fix me. Rarely, although I have seen that happen, then I take their pulse and I find out that they've been dead a long time. So relationships are complicated. So if we're going to get into conflict resolution and communication skills, we've got to really begin to understand who we are. And again, when this type of dynamic happens, this second scenario where John Doe turns out to be a nightmare, what I'm not saying is you should have known this and shouldn't have married the guy. What I'm saying is God has put you guys together for a reason. And if we did his wife's thing, I can make her look just as good or bad as I made him look good or bad. And the truth is, all of us have good and bad characteristics and traits. We don't know that going in. There's something that happens that I do that changes everything. I've heard, y'all have too, stories after stories where the dating was great. I've had couples that lived together for years, and then they finally decided, well, why not? After 10 years, let's get married. And all of a sudden, there's insecurities back and forth, there's hurts, but they've been together. So it wasn't the length of time being together, it's the significance that you take on in the I do. Now you're my husband. And some people look to their partners to validate them, or they look to their partners saying, you're devalidating me or invalidating me. And so we get into this, and we'll get obviously into that later. But who we are, to me, is there's two sides to who we are. If we want to really kind of skinny this down, instead of it being so complicated, we're humans. We have a sinful nature. We pointed this out when we talked about different things a few weeks ago. We experience the effects of sin. It's all around us. We do it. It's done to us. We sin, and we were sinned against growing up. We may have had phenomenal parents, but they were sinners. So they didn't raise us perfectly. Some parents raised us very imperfectly, and everywhere in between. So we sin, and we're sinned against. And as people that say, I believe in Christ as my Savior, we're also, Colossians 3:1 says, because of our faith in Christ, we are in Christ, and we're seated at the right hand of the Father. So on the one hand, we've got one foot here with all our negative stuff and our positive stuff, the human side to us. And on the other hand, we're seated at the right hand of the Father. And the conflict between that is huge. So let's go back to the slide. I'm not going to go back, but let's think back to the slide earlier of who am I when I'm walking with God? Who am I when I'm not walking with God? A lot of this. So I heard a story years ago and I'll botch it, but that's okay. The little kid goes up to the man and says, I hear you're the wisest man in the land. And the man's, well, yes, I am, that kind of. It wasn't me, by the way. But and the little kid says, so why is it that you're so wise? He says, well, there's two dogs inside of me, and they're fighting all the time. And the little boy says, well, which one wins? And he says, whichever one I feed the most. And so it stuck with me for probably 30 years, just where I'm spending my time connecting with God. If I'm connecting with God in my life, the good dog, so to speak, I'm going to be more an imitator of Christ than if I'm not spending time with God, and I'm not spending time in the Word, and I'm just walking in the flesh, or I'm waking up and I'm running late and blowing and going. That's probably not going to be my best day. If I get to have some quality time with God sometime during the day, maybe less judgmental, less critical that day. So this is not so much how we do that today, and this may sound horrible, but to me it's very important to get to know what our flesh looks like. Not to glorify it, but to understand, even symptomatically, if I know selfishness or a belief of mine of feeling worthless is somewhere that I go very easily, then I need to know that, because when I start feeling worthless, a bell ought to go on after enough years of doing this, going, maybe something's wrong. Maybe you're believing your past. Maybe you're believing what someone else has said, or you thought someone else did or said. But I'm not evidently believing that I'm a child of the King. I'm believing I'm a no good, dirty, rotten slave. And so that, knowing my flesh, it's not so that like I said, it's not to make it so famous, but if I know my flesh, here's just some things. This isn't, everything, but when we're in our flesh, we're prideful. We're arrogant. We're selfish. We're self-centered. We're dishonest. We're self-righteous. We're blamers. We create idols. We're immoral. We want our way, not God's way. I think that's most of us, almost every day is my way. I think I got this one. I'll let you know if I need you. Well, I need Him a lot more than I think I need Him, and it takes me so long sometimes to realize I need to surrender this to God, and we want what's best for us. That's our flesh. Our flesh is screaming for me, me, me. It's all about me. It's what I'm not getting. It's what I need. It's my needs, my expectations. That's my flesh. Now, there are some reasonable expectations. I'm not saying all expectations are fleshly. I think it's a reasonable expectation to not, if your husband comes home and hits you in the head with a piece of wood, I think you should expect that not happen. I think that's not normal. So all expectations aren't stupid. That's a pretty good one. Or to be faithful, or to be true, or to love well. None of us do that perfectly. But understanding where we came from helps me understand what's going on. So that what if I'm behaving like I was taught to behave? What if the rules of my family have something to do with this, which you all know I think it does. There's even verses that talk about, the curses of our fathers, and it goes down through generations. And here's a genogram, which I've talked about for weeks. And it's just, I'm not going to go through this much. I'm just going to show it to you. Later, maybe in a few weeks, I'll give it out as a homework assignment, something for you to fill out. But there's a couple of things that I want to point out just in general as we go through. So this is about Jim and Mary. Okay, let's look at Mary's grandparents up here. She was abused by her husband. So he was verbally and physically abusive. If you follow that down, she was abused probably by her father. Okay, and I'm not going to get too deep. I'm just going to show you a trend that I think is kind of interesting. So some of her attributes are she's a disciplinarian, she's angry, she's very busy. Maybe she's busy to keep from thinking about the pain. Maybe she's busy doing something that makes her feel valuable, because being abused and hurt like that, it's hard to find value when you've been so devalued. So let's take it on down to Mary, who's got a lot of dad stuff. Dad's loving and dependable and supportive and assertive and calm, but his father was rigid, had affairs, was an alcoholic. So what you see, two different things going on. Under Mary's side, this generation is doing what that generation did. Does that make sense? If dad's abusive, son's abusive, daughter's, that kind of thing. So Mary has a lot of mom's characteristics who she got from her family. Dad is more reactive. He's going the other direction. So dad's dad was so Mary's grandfather was rigid, had affairs, and was an alcoholic. So Mary's dad maybe is a child of an alcoholic. So what he's going is, I don't ever want to be like that. I want to be different than that. He did this, he did that, maybe a codependent, maybe not, maybe just I don't want to do that. So he's loving, dependable, supportive, assertive, and calm. You see the difference. You see how this plays out. And in any family of origin thing, when we look at genogram, any of this can go different directions. You'll see generations skipped where there's abuse and there's passivity, and then there's abuse and then there's passivity, and each is reacting. Okay, I'll never do that. Well, I'll never do that. My kids, that kind of all or nothing thinking is pretty typical for us to do. Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, what she's saying is, if you go far enough back, you may see what really started the trend. Yeah, and what's interesting is that it doesn't determine how we turn out. It's just an influence. It's what we learned. I'm sorry, I'm taking this apart. It's our normal, and so we have to recognize. If we recognize this, we can go, I don't want to do that to my children. I mean, I want to stop it now. That's one of the biggest motivators when couples come into counseling. They go, we're kind of messed up. Our parents were really kind of messed up, but we really love our kids, and we really don't want them to be messed up. How do we do this? So I don't care what the motive is to bring someone in to work on their marriage, but you don't have to pass this down. And quite frankly, what's going on between this guy and this guy is, from Mary's grandfather to Mary's dad is a extreme reaction. He's going, I'll never do that. It would be like someone that was raised dirt poor, no shoes, and then they decide my kids I'm going to do better than this, and they rise out of the family and they work and they become wealthy. And then what does the motto become? My kids are never going to go through what I went through. So they swing some people, not everybody, they swing to the other extreme and spoil their kids. So they really didn't fix much. They just reacted instead of coming to the balance of saying, I don't want to do that. But it's really hard. It's hard to self-regulate when you don't know what you just know. I don't want this, and so, but I do. So my kids are going to, or let's say they were beaten as a child. My kids are going to know I love them. That's what this guy's doing. Loving, dependable, supportive, assertive, not aggressive. He's assertive. He's calm. So he's reactive, but he might be more in the middle. I don't know where he is. I made this up last night, so we haven't. I haven't really fleshed this out yet. But I just wanted to give you an idea of how strong the influences are, and like she was saying, great grandmothers. I don't usually go quite that far back. Although the other day somebody said, "You need to know about my great grandmother," because very similar kind of what you're saying, and all of a sudden it started making sense. It's not that we're going to go back and fix all these people. You're not. But it does help me understand, especially as a counselor, it's a resource. It helps me understand when a couple's in an argument and the guy says something and she really reacts, really sensitive to that. it helps me understand where that sensitivity comes from. It might be that she was beaten. It might be that she was sexually molested or abused when she was a child. Maybe the theme is I'll never be controlled, or I can't trust men, or whatever. And so if we don't understand what's behind it, how can I have compassion for someone that I don't understand where they came from? And so that's when we get into conflict resolution, understanding, I mean, you're going to be asking yourself questions. If you keep coming to class, we're going to go through the sheet. When we get to that place that was self-awareness, there's questions. What am I blaming my partner for? Is there anything from my past that might be exaggerating my reaction to what was done or said? So all of a sudden, we start asking ourselves some pretty difficult questions so that after that break, we can come back with a better heart and actually have a conversation of ownership. Let me own my fear of abandonment. I was afraid of abandonment, betrayal. I went off on you. Will you forgive me? I mean, as opposed to if I just think it's your fault, you got some splaining to do. You know, I'm hurt and this is your fault. I'm ready for my apology. And this opens this up. It doesn't mean if I'm angry with you, it's always me, but there's part of it that's me. There's maybe 90% of it may be me, maybe 10%. Blow the percentages out. If I have 10% ownership, if my wife does 90% of a problem, which you never do, and I'm 10%, but I go off on her and say something verbally hurtful, I need to apologize for that instead of saying, well, and I don't need to apologize and go, okay, I'm sorry. Now let's hear because you've got a lot more to apologize for than I do. That's selfish apology. I'll say I'm sorry because I'm trying to manipulate you into telling me that you're sorry. So I'll own my 10%. Now let's hear your 90. And when we get into this further down the road, it's speaking up for what your part is, because maybe they see your part as 90. You only see it as 10. So I need to apologize, and I may be disappointed that I don't get an apology back, but if I do it to get, and there's strings attached to my apology, not so healthy. You see, does that kind of make sense? Give me a little feedback. What does this mean? What is this stirring up in you? Yeah, and a lot of people will be protective. I mean, they'll protect somebody who's passed away. It's just, yeah, it's we're not going there. Some families, they just sweep it under the rug and we don't talk about problems. So we go back to that image of that guy that I painted. This guy, maybe he doesn't talk about problems because that's not what we do. We just avoid them and we smile and pretend like everything's fine. Maybe that's it. Anyone else? What does this stir up inside? I'm not asking you for your dirty laundry, although. Yeah, that's very honest. You're just like your dad. You're just acting like your mother. That kind of stuff. Nothing. I can't think of anything much more painful or shameful than that. But it's where we go sometimes. Well, yeah. Let's say, for example, mom's a horrible alcoholic, and you don't know, and then you realize someday that her dad left when she was 2, and mom was abusive to her. I'm not saying drinking's healthy, but there's a pretty good reason why she drinks. But you may not know that. She may be protecting them, so the kids don't know mom was taken advantage of as a child. They just know she's cranky, irritable all the time, drinks too much, embarrassing. I mean, if you don't understand what's behind that, it's hard to have compassion for her if you don't know where she came from. And you don't always get that kind of stuff. I think we assume that nothing has happened. And I learned through what I do, I can't assume anything. I mean, I never know until we get into this. Anybody else have something that this helps you with, or you can just become kind of like that person, but it's all of a sudden here she is again. I mean, so you kind of trigger back to the real hurtful person, so to speak, in this analogy. You can certainly understand. I realize I pushed that button, and I know that's a sensitive place for you, and I'm sorry. Then all of a sudden you're moving out into compassion to someone, not get over it. I mean, that's not me. That's not validating. That's actually the wrong direction. That's gasoline on the fire again. That's a great insight. I couldn't have said it better. And there's a lot of truth to that. There is a reason we're attracted to a certain person, and we can. I'll give you a different example than any that I can think of. But let's say daddy's abusive. okay? And then son is can get really angry and throw stuff, but doesn't. When you're dating, you don't see that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden you start realizing, you know, there's something, or let's say your dad was abusive, and you marry a guy who gets angry and rages a little bit, okay? Then what you start realizing is I didn't know that I was marrying my dad, so to speak, but there's something about this guy that feels good. There's something attractive about it, more than just looks. There's something, and maybe it's something, maybe because everybody's got their own normals, like we talked about a few weeks ago. So maybe the good part of dad, or let's say the dad was a real confident man, and maybe, or the guy you're attracted to is a very confident man, but what I'm saying is you may be attracted to something that when you get behind that door number 2, you're gonna go, oh my goodness, what have I done? Yeah, then that's what, and that's when people come into my office, it's like I realize I've married the wrong person. And I'm going, I don't think so. I mean, I don't think God's messing around with us. I think He's really drawing us to Himself, going, I can't do this unless you change my heart and unless you give me the grace to love this person that sometimes acts so unlovable and is sometimes so unkind to me. And so I think that is what's going on. I think there is this almost an aroma and attractiveness to someone that is going to be very similar. I mean, a lot of counseling education is that you recreate your family of origin. You know, and it won't be, and you think you're going to the opposite extreme, but there's something back there. And I'm not saying it's always true, right. But yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I would say that almost always happens to where we're going, I didn't know that. You know, it feels like, you know, I thought you represented this person when we're dating, and now I'm realizing you're this. So I married this person. I didn't know I was marrying this person, and yeah, we don't know that. I mean, again, when the word I do happens at the altar, something changes. And it's radical. All of a sudden, who you are is different. You're not my fiance anymore. You are the man or woman that's supposed to meet all my needs and always be there for me. And if I'm insecure, you're always supposed to know it, and you're supposed to be my, you know, hero. I didn't know that. I mean, I just thought I liked you and thought you were attractive and thought we got along really well. But all of a sudden, now you take on a different role. And so that's where the confusion comes in. And I would say you didn't marry the wrong guy. You married for the reasons you married. It didn't work out like you thought it would. But so now let's dig in and find out what expectations of yours are unhealthy. What is it? So then, do I focus on the 5 wonderful things that I've always loved, or the 50, or do I focus on the 5 or 50 horrible things about you, or things that I don't really care much about you? So then I get to choose. You get to choose. So because if you're going to focus on my sinful nature, I'm hosed. I mean, I'm out. I mean, so we've got to choose, because the longer we're married, the longer we know the other side of the story, and all of a sudden the family of origin stuff shows up. It's very complicated, but I think God is, again, I really do think God, I think we think, you know, God make me like Jesus is some switch that's going to, one day I'll wake up and be like Christ. Every day I'm more like Christ. Every day I'm a little more like Christ. And I think God's up there with a hammer and a chisel going, okay, I know this is going to hurt, but you wanted to be like Jesus, and that's what I want. I want you to be an imitator of Christ, and it's whack. And sometimes we get mad at God because He's whacking on us. How can you say you love me and yet I've lost my child, or my husband died in this, or Daddy did this to me? Where were you when that happened? And God, I can't speak for God, but I think what He's saying is, I'm chiseling on you all the time because you matter so much to me. I'm going to draw you to me no matter what. And you may hate me, but everything I do is in your best interest. That just absolutely undoes me. So, yeah, you had a hand. Absolutely. I see it used as a weapon all the time. You know, you're just doing what your mother did. You're just like your father. And now they got living proof. You actually told me how bad your dad was. So if your dad wasn't so messed up, you wouldn't be so messed up. And then that's very offensive to the person who was messed up by their dad, because it's like you're, you know, dismissing what's really going on here. So you're absolutely correct. And so where we're going to go with this is, as where we're going to go in conflict resolution, or what I want to help us all do, and we work on this all the time, Teresa and I do, how do I move from a place of judgment and self-righteousness and arrogance and needing to be right and needing to make sure you know you're wrong? How do I move from that junk to a place of compassion and humility? How do I forgive you like God forgives me every day? How do I see you like God sees you? I mean, I don't know. Again, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. We need God's help, but the goal is compassion. The goal is understanding. The goal is, like you said, don't use it as dynamite. Your marriage will, it'll blow up. I mean, thank you for the metaphor. I appreciate that. That's the word I've been looking for all week. But that is a good point. So we need to what he's also, I think what you're saying, or what I'm hearing is when we know this about each other, we're becoming more vulnerable. And as we become more vulnerable, we either really get hurt worse, or we really are loved well, and that builds intimacy. If I can be me, good and bad, my wife knows my past and I know her past. If she can love me anyway in spite of my junk, and hopefully she focuses more on my good, those two good things I do, okay, the one, and there's one I think is coming along pretty well, then we have a chance at building intimacy, because intimacy is being known and accepted. That's good intimacy. I mean, intimacy is really understanding, and we're fixing to get into even more. So this is our parents' stuff and their parents' stuff and how we're influenced. Where we're going next week is this. What's our life been like? Where are the losses? Where are the disappointments? Where are the hurts? And that we're going to put this grid on top of the genogram. So you're talking about complex. Not only did you have a rough or an imperfect upbringing, look at what's happened in your life. I do my timeline, and I weep. I mean, her timeline, I would imagine inside she weeps. And yet it's a part of who she is, it's a part of who I am. So you either know me and I'm safe with you, or I'm not. So this is where we're going to get off that. But any questions before we go? I know we're out of time. Here's a short answer, and I think that's a phenomenal question, and it's probably weeks of talking. But here's the difference. I think I believe we're one flesh with two opinions, two different beliefs, two different ways of seeing things, different feelings. So how do I validate your feelings or your dreams or your hopes and desires without saying they're mine too? How do we not have all mutual thoughts, but how do we act like I won't say a two-headed monster. Let's talk about Siamese twins. That's so much sweeter. You know, you've got Siamese twins that are still joined. They're one flesh, but you've got one that's outgoing and smoking and drinking, and the others is a very religious person. But so they have different ways of seeing things, yet they are one flesh. And I don't think that's exactly what God had in mind, but it helps me understand they're going to have different thoughts, different beliefs, different opinions, different feelings. One of you will be hurt when the other is not, and said something, and you said, that's really hurtful. Really? Why is that hurtful? How could, so we're never going to see it the same. So that's where the compassion and the understanding and the validation is going to be critical. And we're going to spend, I think, a pretty good amount of time on that piece that you're talking about. So that's a great question.
When you're talking about genograms, and we all know our parents we grew up with, and so you can describe your mom and your dad, but are you saying that then as a child you think about your relationship with your grandparents, or then do you enter into conversation with your mom and your dad and ask them what was their relationship? Could have happened when they were 65 and they both snore and they just don't want to, and so you know that as a grandchild, but the parents grew up in a different home where they weren't so much Rob and Laura Petrie.
I'm saying to answer, if you're asking a question, I think the answer to that is a little of both. Some people know a lot. Some people really think they know a lot about their grandparents, which is what I think you're saying. I think it's a great exercise to go sit down and with your parents and say, tell me about grandma. Don't just say, I remember her being a real alcoholic and, with that butcher knife chasing us around. Anything else I should know about her? You're not going to get very far with mom if you start attacking her mother. But if you go in and you say, help me, I'm working on trying to understand where I came from. Talk to me about grandmother. Even your sibling can say, I didn't see it that way. There's 3 years difference, and maybe they have a different perspective. Maybe it's a mother-daughter, father-daughter thing, and the son was out. I mean, so you can take two people that were in a fire and their house burnt down, and one of them goes, "Well, that was rough. Whew, glad we're out of that burning house," and the other person is in therapy for the rest of their life over PTSD issues. So how we react to what happened is different, and we need to allow for those and have compassion that's meant so much to you. That's everything. So let me close this in prayer. I know Father, we thank you for this. I thank you for this wonderful class and the things that have been said. Lord, help us to continue. Well, Lord, I ask you to keep chiseling on us, and as painful as that is, I pray that we will become more like you, and that's the end goal, is really to love you with all our heart, mind, and soul. And I pray that you will build into us a desire and a hunger to know you better and to walk with you. Heal all of our marriages, Lord. And yet in that, Lord, keep pointing us to our need for you to love each other well. Thank you for forgiving us. Thank you for the freedom to come to a class and talk about these things and share safely with each other in this class, Lord. So I thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.